Fate. Souls and Singularities by Mundatorem Chapter 21-23. Chapter 21. Returning Heroes, welcome back to Chaldea. Olga spoke as the group walked out of their coffins. I am satisfied with how this mission turned out. She nodded her head. Now, please follow me for Debray. Astolfo blew a raspberry and cut her off. I'm going for a nap. Then skipped past her. Sigurd nodded his head and coughed a few times.
As am I, he eventually spoke, then bowed slightly to Olga. If you will excuse me, Lady Sorceress. He walked past the white-haired woman, leaving her stuttering at the rather abrupt exits.
You guys got alcohol here? Cu asked with an inquisitive expression as he looked Romani up and down. The man blinked, then sent Olga a confused look before turning back to the Lancer. Why yeah. We have a bar on the 3rd level. Thank fuck. Cu let out a breath and turned to Ash and clapped him once on the shoulder. Let's go. I'm gonna show you how the Celts celebrated a victory. Assassin, you're coming too. I see. Sasaki nodded once. In truth, I am also curious about this, Chaldea. He murmured to himself and followed the Lancer servant. Ash shrugged and followed after the Irish Lancer. What about the report? Olga shouted after them. We have to detail our mission. Why? Ash turned to her. Seems simple enough. We arrived, killed dragons and other warriors, then left. With that he turned around and followed Cu out of the room and down the corridor. Don't worry, Director. Mash gave the woman a reassuring smile. Me and Senpei will help you with the report. She turned to her master. Right, Senpei?
A yawning Ritsuka looked over at her. Right, yes, he slowly blinked his eyes. Sorry, just a little tired.
Probably the ray shift. Roman explained. It takes a lot out of you if you aren't used to it. He turned to Olga. Director, I would suggest we place the debriefing on hold until Fujimaru is at his best. Olga grit her teeth, then turned away. Red-faced. Fine. We'll do this tomorrow. Romani, start searching for the next singularity, and you? She spun around and pointed at Ritsuka. You'll be summoning more servants tomorrow as well. We need more hands-on if we are to get Chaldea back in working order. All right. Ritsuka nodded. So, you can't taste any of this? Cu asked the servant as Ash downed another beer. I cannot. He admitted. Sasaki sat just near them with a small cup of sake which he occasionally sipped from. Although, he frowned and looked down. If we were to speak of alcohol, I believe Sigurd has a recipe for the drink that even the undead could taste. It was pleasant. Oh, Cu raised an eyebrow and have an intrigued look. What was it? Siegbrow, he called it. Ash replied with a nostalgic smile. I suspect if he were not being treated for his injuries, he would be more than willing to brew some for us. Huh, Cu nodded his head. That'll be something to look forward to. He drank his pint of beer, then looked down at it with a frown. What the hell is this stuff anyway? He turned to the barkeeper, one of the few humans left on Chaldea by the name of Francis. What is this stuff? Lager, Francis replied. At Cu's deadpan expression he clarified, it's called Foster's. Tastes like piss. Cu grumbled, you got any Irish booze? We have Guinness, Francis shrugged. Cu turned back around and squinted slightly. I have no idea what the hell that even is. He turned back to Francis. Fine, just get me a pint of that stuff.
Sure, I'm telling you guys, Cu grumbled to the other two servants. Booze back in my day was so much simpler. It basically knocked you on your ass for the whole day and stamped on your head when you woke up.
Sounds pleasant. Sasaki replied with a raised eyebrow. Cu chuckled at him.
How else are you gonna distract people from how shit everything was? He shrugged. Still, nothing like raiding a tavern after a battle to calm the nerves. He looked at Ash. What about you? What did you do after killing gods and monsters and shit like that?
Normally, Ash asked and drank from the glass in front of him. Returned to Firelink Shrine. Use the souls I had collected and allow the Firekeeper to strengthen me. Or turn them into weapons. Weapons? Cu scrunched up his face. Like what? You turned a guy's soul into a hatchet or something? Oh yes. Ash nodded. If I still had my bottomless box on me, I would show you. I amassed quite the collection of trinkets. What happened to your box? Ash raised his hand then frowned. I do not know. I believe I lost it somewhere. A shame. A pity indeed. Sasaki sighed. Perhaps I could have found a replacement sword. Oh yes. Ash turned to him. You used one of those Eastern blades, did you not? I did. Sasaki nodded. A Nodashi. You have heard of them? I wielded a few once. Ash replied. One I used prior to the onyx blade was the frayed blade. A katana transposed from the soul of Madir. Who? Cu asked with a raised eyebrow and took a sip of his beer as Francis placed it in front of him and wandered off. The archdragon which lived in the ringed city. Ash replied, which caused Sasaki to widen his eyes and Cu to choke on his drink. What? Cu asked in between coughing bursts. You made a sword, out of a dragon? It was a good sword, Ash replied. Better have been. Cu shook his head. Damn. Now I'm kind of sad I'll never see it. As am I, Ash frowned, then looked at Sasaki. How will you fight with no weapon you are familiar with? For the moment, I do not know. Sasaki shrugged. It was a mundane blade, it can be replaced. Perhaps we may yet find a solution. Ash shrugged his shoulders. I am familiar with a few blacksmiths of legend in my word. Surely you have your own? A couple. Cu scratched his chin. Probably. But I wouldn't bet money on summoning any of them. We could do with some women around here though. Why? Ash titled his head in confusion. Cu and Sasaki stared at him with slightly raised eyebrows before looking at EAC other. Cu seemingly came to a realization. Oh right, he muttered, you're a zombie or something. Probably doesn't even work anymore. I do not follow. Ash spoke as he looked between the two in confusion, which only seemed to grow when Cu looked at him with a pained expression and pat him on the shoulder. You have my sympathies, pal. Cu spoke in an apologetic tone, leaving Ash confused. So how did it go with the briefing? Astolfo asked as he sat himself down next to the other servants during breakfast. The only exceptions to the eating were Sigward and Ash, the former having been able to make Estes stew for them. If you were going to fall asleep right at the start, why did you show up? Ash asked with a slight frown as he sipped his stew. The pink-haired boy pouted at him and huffed. Hey, it wasn't just me, he muttered under his breath, sending a small smirk Sigward's way. The Onion Knight merely coughed and looked away guiltily. Yeah, she hates your guts right now. Cu chuckled. At least Pinky here wasn't snoring the whole time. The table chuckled at his expense before Cu pointed something out. Speaking of, you're looking a lot better than yesterday. How come? Ah, I was merely low on magical energy. Sigward leapt at the change in topic. Once I had my reserves back at full power, I was simply able to heal myself with miracles. Cool. Astolfo nodded his head. Sounds useful. Indeed. Sigward nodded. Cu then crossed his arms as he finished his breakfast. Speaking of cool, the Lancer smirked. Ash tells me you got some drink that even undead guys like you can taste. Sigward stilted his head, then widened his eyes and broke into a grin. Ah yes. Siegbrow. A fine drink. I would be happy to make some for you all. Nice. Cu nodded his head. We'll save that for later. He sniffed and looked around before blinking. Where's the kid anyway? I thought him and his girl would have been here by now. Ah. Sigward spoke up. The Lady Sorceress and Madame Vinci took them away for summoning more servants. All right. Cu nodded. We're getting more people in here. He shook his head. Hopefully we'll get some women in. He furrowed his brows as he stared at the opposite side of the cafeteria and blinked a few times. What the? Ash looked around and saw the other servant staring off in the same direction. What is wrong? He then looked and immediately scrunched his face up in confusion at the sight. This is great, master. The blonde-haired girl with emerald eyes, wearing a simple tunic spoke with a giddy expression as she entered the cafeteria. Upon the back of a horse-sized wolf. He's so fluffy. She squealed and continued to rub the back of the ears of the animal, which seemed to please it with how its tail was wagging. You said she was a knight, my liege? Another voice called out. The group turned away from the bizarre sight to see a man clad in silver around with a metal helm with the carving of a face in it with a crown of thorns looked on. She acts much like a squire. He shook his head and looked to the group. These are out comrades? Yep. Ritska replied as he walked out in front of them. Hey guys, meet the backup. Master, Ash pointed behind him. That is a great wolf. Yes. Ritska nodded. I was a little surprised at first too. Never really heard of wolves being heroes. You got any idea? There were tales of Artorias having a great wolf companion. Ash shrugged and looked at Sigward. Although the name is something I cannot recall right now. Can you remember? At the moment, I'm afraid not. I'm sure it will come to us eventually. The Onion Knight shrugged. And the girl? Ah. Ritska grinned. That is Sir Gareth of the Knights of the Round Table. She's a lancer. Who like jousting? And dogs? Who's a good boy? Woof. Cu was still staring at the wolf before he eventually spoke. I feel as though this is some big joke at my expense. He muttered and looked over at the knight. Who's this guy? I am Esser Verndari. The knight replied, sworn to King Vendrick and holder of the title of the Looking Glass Knight. I am the servant, Shielder. Mash was pretty happy. Ritska spoke up. She's pleased to have another Shielder servant to help her. I have agreed to train her. Verndari spoke in a firm tone, although we will need to wait for her arm to be commissioned. Commissioned? Ash titled his head in confusion. Yeah. Ritska nodded. We also got a caster, an archer and kind of a saber. Kind of? You look like you've been on a run around. The burly man with the long white beard spoke as he walked across the makeshift forge towards the saber servant. Should have known you'd be here. You look well, Andre. Ash replied with a smile, then looked behind the servant to the anvil and metal. Making yourself busy already? Steel needs forgan. Andre shrugged and went back to his anvil. I need to keep busy, not much good in a fight, so I help how I can. Making a sword for Mash? May as well call her Potato. Andre grumbled and shook his head, sending the girl out with nothing but a shield. Honestly, bunch of idiots. How familiar are you with Eastern swords? Sasaki stepped forwards and asked. Andre turned to him and sniffed. I've seen him before. He nodded his head, made a few of them. What do you call them, katanas, or something like that? Why? I am in need of a new sword. Sasaki admitted, my old one was broken. I suspect you'll be wanting one of them katanas then? Katana. Sasaki corrected, and no, it would be a nodashi. No idea what that word means. Andre grumbled and looked at Ash. It was similar to a laundry pole sword. Sasaki turned to Ash with a raised eyebrow and an amused expression on his face. Oh, those ones. Andre nodded. I'm macking a straight sword for the lil girl. I'll see what I can do about your blade. He turned around. You seen Seif about? Big dog was barkin' and all that. Seif, the wolf. Andre clarified, surprised to see it. It was only a pup when Esser Artorias brought it around. Little bastard the mud was. Always shittin' everywhere. Milady Gareth. Sigward called up to her. The girl turned to him and frowned. I'm not a lady. I'm a knight. You can call me Sir Gareth. She grinned, or just Gareth. I see. Sigward nodded. Gareth then, for how long do you intend to ride the wolf? He's soft. Gareth muttered and huffed the wolf, and he has a big sword. He's the perfect jousting ride. Let the little lady have her fun. An amused voice brought Sigward's attention away from the girl and towards a tanned man in green armor. Well met. I'm Arash. He held out a hand. Sigward held out his own and shook it. Sigward of Katarina. He smiled. You are the archer? Oh, Arash smiled. How do you know I'm not a caster? She's standing behind you. Sigward pointed out with an amused expression. Arash quickly copied it. Hello. The young woman wearing dark robes, a black pointy hat spoke up. I'm Beatrice. I'm a caster. Nice to meet you. Never met a Katarinan before. In that case, I hope to represent my people well. Sigward gave a jovial laugh. Although I am curious where you were. Ah. The Sorceress Olga Marie. She wanted to ask some questions about sorcery from Lordran. Beatrice replied, then flushed with embarrassment. Unfortunately. I can't really tell her that much. I wasn't taught in Vinheim. I see. Sigward nodded his head. Regardless, you are welcome here, Lady Beatrice. Oh. Beatrice stuttered and waved her hands in front of her. You don't have to call me, Lady Beatrice. My friends call me Betty. Although I don't think I've ever had any friends. She muttered the last part of the sentence under her breath while Sigward and Arash shared a frowning expression. That won't do. Arash shook his head. You'll be fighting with us. Best get to know everyone here. He flashed her a grin. Right, Betty? All right. Beatrice rapidly nodded her head while sporting a wide grin, then looked around. Where is everyone else though? I believe Ash has gone down to speak with the new saber. Sigward replied. Astolfo is. He looked around then chuckled. He is off with the Lady Gareth and the wolf. The pair looked over to see the pink-haired rider and the blonde lancer frantically rubbing the large wolf's ears and belly while the beast panted and wagged its tail. And Sir Chillane is. He frowned. He appears to have departed. See you, Chillane. Arash blinked, then looked at the wolf before chuckling. Ah. I see why he might have fled. Let's just say that his legend involves dogs. I see. Sigward nodded. Still. Welcome. We were just having breakfast when you arrived. He grinned. I would be most pleased for you all to join us. Sure. Arash agreed, always important to start the day with a good meal. What happened to the big silver guy? Beatrice blinked and looked around. How did he? This is your shield? Verndari looked on Mash's cross-shaped shield with a tilted head. Impressive. To wield a great shield of this size. It will suit you well. Yes. Mash nodded with a small smile. I can fight with it, but swinging a shield around like a club is not something I would have advised. Verndari shook his head. While I was his squire, I attempted a similar feat with Esser Raim. He told me if I attempted that again, he would take away my shield and beat me with it. He let out a small chuckle at the girl's shocked expression. Esser Raim was tough but fair. Simple man, swords are for fighting and shields are for defense. Not more. I don't really have a sword. Mash looked down. Verndari nodded his head and crossed his arms. Yes. We are fortunate to have a blacksmith on hand, however, and while I am not a master of the blade, I shall instruct you as best as I can. He pat her on the shoulder. I was the knight who all potential knights would fight if they wished to serve King Vendrick. So, you were like a trainer then? No, I was more a reference of skill. He corrected her. If they defeated me, then they would be accepted. If they lost, then they would die. Die. Mash recoiled in surprise. Verndari tilted his head at her. Is that so surprising? They were attempting to be a personal knight of King Vendrick's court. If they could not defeat me, then they would have failed when it most mattered to the king. Oh, Mash frowned. I guess that makes sense, but it seems so wasteful to kill them. What if they could have gotten better? It was not a secret. Verndari waved her off. All in King Vendrick's army knew my role. Few who were not skilled enough braved me. It was better that they die at my hands than at the hands of an assassin meant to kill the king. Oh, Mash slumped. Verndari sighed. I have no intention of killing you. For one, I believe our liege would be disappointed in your death. The made Mash smile slightly. However, I have no intention of allowing you near the front lines until you are capable of swinging a sword with the skill of a reasonably trained squire. He loomed over her. It would not do for you to fail at a critical moment and for our liege to lose his life. All right. Mash nodded and put on a determined face. I won't let you down. Verndari raised an eyebrow behind his helm and shook his head. It is not me you would fail if you were to fall. He looked around. Our first order of business is finding a training hall. You will learn first how to swing before we start using swords. Do you understand? Yes. Mash nodded. We have a training hall set up on the second level. Good. Verndari nodded. Lead the way, Squire Kirilite. Squire? The girl blinked in confusion. Verndari tilted his head. You are training to be a knight of our liege? You are to be my squire as of this moment. He gestured ahead of them. Lead the way. Okay. Mash nodded and walked on, the 6-foot knight following after her. Roman Empire 60 AD, tell me. The creature churned as it limply held up its puppet body to address the servant. What news of the Romans? They have united against you. The caster in green robes replied. My pets revealed to me that they have acquired servants of their own. However, they march against our forces only during the day. Oh, the Sun Knight, the caster replied. He appears to only possess his strength under the sun. If he were to be ambushed under the darkness. This is most intriguing news. The mass churned. The memories of the emperors serve me well. A meal with an intriguing aftertaste. How many of your pets are available? Several thousand. He replied, with many more ready to be birthed. Excellent. The creature slithered along the ground. Rome remains out of our reach. The Sun Knight and the child guard it well. She consolidates her forces, but cannot march them out. The forests are my domain. His body cracked. And the isle to the south? All attempts to reach it by sea have failed. The caster frowned. It appears as though something is guarding the island from us. Have we any idea what? I would suggest a giant. The ships we sent were destroyed by what could best be described as large spears shaped like arrows. The creature frowned. For the moment, the island remains out of our reach. Although the giant is protecting something there. He flicked his head over to the caster. Have your pets revealed anything? None of the villagers I captured have spoken of it as of yet. It appears they are as ignorant as we are for the time being. Unfortunate. The creature slithered away. Our campaign through the Gaul territory? The caster smiled. My dear Freya does well. Her children have swarmed through the region and decimated many of the tribes. The Gauls have been forced to fall back into the Roman territories. We have a great many prisoners. You are mistaken, the creature leaned down and smiled. We have a great many meals. And soldiers, how many in total? Almost 20,000 villagers, he replied. The creature gave a pleased rumble. Take the woman and children. The young humans shall provide sustenance and the woman shall make for excellent carriers for the eggs. They shall, my lord. The caster smiled, the creature nodded its puppet head. Kill the elderly and send the able-bodied men to me. We are in need of more soldiers, and I shall provide. Of course, my lord. He then frowned, there is more, troublesome news. Oh, the rider. The chaos abomination. Caster cringed as the creature made a churning noise. She was spotted heading east. She goes to Rome. Would they not kill her on sight? No. My lord. My spies report that she encountered the Sun Knight at the border during a scouting mission. They have granted her asylum. The creature growled. This is most troublesome. Berserker. Send him out. We shall intercept them before they are too far gone. I shall make the orders. Caster nodded, and, shall he be provided with an entourage? He shall. Give him 200 of your fastest spiders, and I shall grant them 4 of my own personal beasts. Is that necessary, my lord? Caster frowned. We only have a dozen of them at the moment. If we were to lose them. She is a chaos witch. The creature cut him off. I shall take no chances. We shall make ready to summon another servant. If they can be controlled, all the better. If not, I am quickly appreciating these skills the emperors possessed. Of course, my lord. Caster nodded. It is as you wish. Worry not. My dear duke, the creature chuckled. I shall prevail. New servants. Don't worry, we're not jumping into the septem singularity in the next chapter. We'll be spending some time in Chaldea first. Everyone doing things, getting to know people, that sort of stuff. We also have new servants for me to place down the stat sheets for, and the dialogue, so here we go. Looking Glass Knight, Esser Verndari, Servant, Shielder. Strength. C. Endurance. Agility. D. Mana. B. Luck. D. Noble Phantasm. A. Looking Glass. A. Anti-unit. Summon low-level servant class spirits. In the form of Caster, Lancer and Saber, however may only summon one at a time and time for is not instant. Saber stats Strength. C. Endurance. D. Agility. D. Lancer stats Strength. D. Endurance. D. Agility. C. Caster stats Strength. E. Endurance. E. Agility. E. Mana. D. Sorcery. D. Despite its versatility, the spirits only have a basic skill set, more akin to a support role than a front-line force. Max target. Max range. 0 to 400 Spegelheimur. C. Barrier. Max target. Max range. 2. The mirror realm of the shield expands outwards temporarily to defend. Class skills. Magic resistance. C. Riding. D. Self-defense field. C. Personal skills. Instinct. C. Mana burst. Lightning. C. Summoning. At your summoning, I have arrived. I am the servant shielder. Esser Verndari. The Looking Glass Knight of Drangleic. I will serve you as I would my own king, my liege. Dialogue 1. Another shielder servant. You speak of the pink-haired girl. Squire Mash, yes. The fact that she fights with her shield rather than a sword worries me greatly, meaning no offense, my liege. Dialogue 2. Relationship between master and servant. You are my liege. That is all that I need know. Dialogue 3. Free time. My liege. There is no such thing. One must always find some way to occupy themselves. Dialogue 4. If you have Esser Rame is here, is he? He trained me from a squire. His betrayal and exile were not easy to accept. Perhaps he was right. But it was not his place to accuse the king. He once told me that being a knight means to act in the best interest of the king. Perhaps he did. But I wish he hadn't. Dialogue 5. If you have Velsdat, the royal aegis, you would not have expected a cleric to be one of the strongest warriors in Drangleic. It was partly due to his might that miracles were tolerated. Velsdat set a standard for all clerics to follow. However, his aiding in the banishment of Esser Rame. We were never truly on speaking terms again. Although if he has sworn himself to your service, you will never find a more loyal warrior. Dialogue 6. If you have Elizabeth Báthory, the young woman, I must insist you keep her away from me. She keeps asking to use my shield to use as a mirror for her makeup. It is most insulting to my honor that my ceremonial shield be used for such things. Dialogue 7. If you have Medibi, that one, the queen, she sometimes sends glances my way. Although I have heard less than scrupulous rumors of her, I fear she has set her sights on me as she has some of the other male servants.
Dialogue 8. If you have King Vendrick, my king, it is a privilege to be in your presence once again.
Dialogue 9. If you have Aldea, the king's brother, Sir Aldea he is a scholar by nature. However, I advise caution. Even during my serving of King Vendrick's rule, there were disturbing rumors surrounding him.
Dialogue 10. If you have Duke Seldora, the Duke of Brightstone Cove, it was a great mystery how the mining town came to be overrun by abominations. The court was in uproar for many months. Now that I have met the man, I wish I had never learned the answer to the mystery.
Dialogue 11. If you have Knights of the Round Table, to be in the company of such powerful knights, their king must have been quite capable to command such figures. Dialogue 12. If you have Gwyn's 4 Knights, when I was a young boy, my mother would read me stories of the tales of an Orlando, of Gwyn and his knights. To meet them now, it is quite exhilarating. Dialogue 13. If you have female casters, it is more of personal experience, my liege. I do not hate them as such, but I am distrustful. It will not affect my performance as your knight. Likes, training. I also enjoy the rain sometimes. Hate is a strong word, but witches, it is merely the remnants of Nishandra which influence me. Wish for the Holy Grail. I do not feel the need for a wish. Serving a worthy liege is reward enough. Bond level 1. You have the markings of a most worthy liege to serve. I am quite pleased with this. Blonde level 2. Your continued commands are honorable, my liege. Serving you brings great joy to my heart. Blonde level 3. I was the guardian knight of Drangleic in the king's court. All those who wished to serve as the king's personal knights would first face me in battle. It was a rewarding experience. The feeling that I was making the king safer was a warm one. Bond level 4. It was not to be. Sir Raim had entered the court and in full view of the entire gathering, he denounced Nishandra as a witch and spawn of the abyss. King Vendrick took exception to this. He asked if any would support this claim. I held my tongue. That was when Velstad accused Sir Raim of treason, and called for a trial by combat. He won, and Sir Raim was banished. Bond level 5. It haunts me. Even now. I had many suspicions about Nishandra myself, but I could not do it. He was my king. If I stood before him and supported Sir Raim's claims, it is my greatest folly. Sir Raim was right. And the kingdom fell to ruin. I often wondered if it would have been better to speak up. I can only hope I do not fail you when it matters most, my liege. Birthday. A most joyous day, my liege. I shall arrange for the kitchen to prepare and banquet immediately. During an event, my liege. I believe that excitement is afoot. Perhaps we shall engage as well? First ascension. I feel stronger, it is all the better to serve you. Second ascension. This feeling. I shall endeavor to put this strength to use in serving you as best as I can. Third ascension. I am almost myself again. If I may. I believe we should continue, my liege. I must be stronger if I am to serve you fully. Fourth ascension. I swear my sword and my shield to your cause. So long as I am here, I shall never betray you, my liege. Beatrice servant. Caster strength. E endurance. E agility. D mana. B luck. C noble phantasm. D soulstorm. D anti-unit. Max target. 20. Max range. 0 to 30. Class skills item construction. C territory creation. C personal skills. Sorceries. B unorthodox methodology. C being one of the few sorcerers to not be a product of the Vinheim schools. She has a unique perspective on the approach to sorcery. Catalyst creation. B can create catalysts from even the most mundane of materials. Summoning. H hello. I'm a caster. My name is Beatrice. B but my friends call me Betty. N not that I'm saying you're my friend. Not that I'm saying I don't want to be friends. C can we start over? Dialogue 1. S so you just want to sit around with me? Oh. WL. I don't mind. Dialogue 2. Master and servant relations? Our relations? I couldn't possibly. Unless. No, what am I thinking? Dialogue 3. There's a lot of people around here. It's kind of scary. Dialogue 4. If you have Seath the Scaleless, Seath. The Dragon Seath. The one who created sorcery. Here, I can't be seen by him. I make catalysts out of sticks, he'll think I'm a fraud. Dialogue 5. If you have Strayed, I am a little scared of Strayed. He's very confrontational. He makes fun of me. Says I'm a feeble witch. Dialogue 6. If you have Darklurker, you sometimes I see a thing floating around the halls at night. It's sort of scary. Dialogue 7. If you have Priscilla, there's something about Priscilla. She's quite nice to be around. She has a calming effect to her. Dialogue 8. If you have Medea, I don't really know about her legend all that much. But she's a very talented sorceress. I wonder if she could make me her disciple? Dialogue 9. If you have Bearer of the Curse, it's nice to be around a fellow sorceress. She doesn't even judge me on my catalyst. She calls me Betty. Dialogue 10. If you have Merlin, the wizard, he's quite forward. Although I'm a little bit scared of him. Something about his smile makes my heart flutter. Not in a good way. Likes, well. I like learning new things. Our research is always fun. Hates, well. I didn't really like all those stuffy rules at Vinheim. Wish for the Holy Grail, wish? I suppose I would rather study it than wish from it. Bond level 1, you're still working with me? I thought you'd want a better caster. Blonde level 2, why you're standing a little close, did you call me, Betty? Blonde level 3, so. Master. Would you like some Estus? Oh right. You aren't undead. I can't make tea, sorry. Bond level 4, I'm not a very good sorceress, I'm actually a little bit of a klutz. Bond level 5. You still want to travel with me? Well, alright fine, you win. You get this clumsy sorceress as your companion. Just leave it to me, master, I'll do my best, I know you will, Betty. Why yes, I'm your friend Betty. Birthday, happy birthday. I tried to make a cake but it turns out I'm a little clumsy in the kitchen. Ha, sorry. During an event. It's quite loud right now, isn't it? Well. Let's see what all the excitement is, I guess. First ascension, you're willing to put effort into me, thanks. Second ascension, what? Again, I'm not really worth it. Third ascension, seriously. Stop. I am not a very good sorceress, there are loads better. Fourth ascension, fine. You want Betty at her best. I'll do it. I'll show you just how useless this sorceress is. Andre Servant. Saber Strength. B Endurance. B Agility. D. Mana. E Luck. A Noble Phantasm. C Farume Stamine. C Anti-Unit. Max Target. 1. Mac Range. 1 to 2. Despite having low agility, in close range Andre will strike repeatedly in rapid succession. So fast that others would have trouble realizing how many times he truly struck. Andre himself considers this a complete joke of a noble phantasm, he'd never consider using his hammer for anything other than forging blades, class skills, item construction, a territory creation, a magic resistance, d. personal skills, hand-to-hand combat. A blacksmith he may be, that does not mean he can't take care of himself. Blacksmith of Londor. He has lived for a very long time, there are few weapons he cannot craft, and fewer he cannot discern from but a glance. He can turn even the most mundane of materials into high-class swords, capable of rivaling low-class noble phantasms. Summoning, hello there. Servant. Saber? Saber. I never swung no swords. I make 'em not wield 'em. I'm Andre. Blacksmith. You need swords Forgan, I'm your man. Don't ask me to swing 'em though. That would be embarrassin' for everyone involved. Dialogue 1, Saber Servant. What a laugh. Dialogue 2. You need Forgan lessons. I'm your servant, not good for much else. Dialogue 3, Headin' out then? Prithee be careful. Dialogue 4. If you have chosen undead, been many years since I last saw, I am surprised I still remember that one. Dialogue 5. If you have Gale, oh yeah. I remember the red-hooded one. Made him his sword. Good man. Bit older than me but he's good. Dialogue 6. If you have servants from Lothric, all these familiar faces. You're making me feel old, air. Dialogue 7. If you have Lordran, are you trying to make me feel old or something? Some of these guys are wielding the weapons I first made. Dialogue 8. If you have Muramasa, he's a good blacksmith. Still, he's a bit too set on his cutting through fate. Sword only needs to cut through bodies. Likes, what do I like? Smithin'. Hates, something I hate. Watching people swinging their swords about like clubs. Wish for the Holy Grail, a better forge perhaps. Bond level 1. What are you doing bringing me out here? Want me to hammer the enemies to death or something? Blonde level 2. I make good weapons, doesn't mean I use them. Really, stop bringing me out here. Blonde level 3. Fine. You aren't stopping anytime soon. I'll just punch him out then. Bond level 4. Been a smith for as long as I can remember. Which is a long time. Longer than most of the servants, have been alive. Fighting like this is quite new. Bond level 5. I'll always be a smith first, but now you've forced me to become a halfway decent fighter. Birthday. Right. I'll make you a dagger. During an event, all this racket. Louder than a forge. Better go see what they want. First ascension, well, I can swing a hammer faster now. What more do you want? Second ascension, you're not quite all there are you. You're wasting your resources on the damn smith. Third ascension, again, stop. This is getting stupid now. Fourth ascension, well done there. You've now made a smith swing a hammer stronger. I ain't some fightin' master. I make swords. You need swords. I'm your man. You need warriors, less so.
Sif, Great Grey Wolf. Servant. Saber. Strength. B.
Endurance. C. Agility. Amana. E. Luck. B. Noble Phantasm. A. Greatsword of Artorias. A passive skill. Enemy of the Abyss against wraiths, demons and other cursed beings. This sword is their natural killer. Entea Chosnyon. A. Anti-unit. Max target. 10 to 20, max range. 0 to 15. Releases a small wave of energy class skills. Magic resistance. B. Writing. Personal skills. Animal communication. A. Great Grey Wolf. A tracking is easy. Can detect servants with a presence concealment of rank B and below. Monstrous strength. B. Natural resistances. A toxins, poisons or bleeding. Sif cannot easily succumb to any of them. Summoning, woof. Dialogue 1 panting and wagging of tail. Dialogue 2. Woof. Woof. Dialogue 3 howling. Dialogue 4. If you have chosen undead. Sad whine. Dialogue 5. If you have Artorias, happy barking and excessive wagging of tail. Dialogue 6. If you have Berserker Artorias, pitiful whining and drooping of ears. Dialogue 7. If you have Gareth, happy barks and rolling around. Dialogue 8. If you have Hessian Lobo, confused bark and tilting of head. Dialogue 9. If you have Enkidu, confused noises and sniffing. Dialogue 10. If you have Barghest, confused bark and sniffing. Likes aggressively puts out head to receive head pats. Hates growls at dark corridors. Wish for the Holy Grail. Confused tilt of head. Bond level 1. Happy bark. Blonde level 2. Happy bark and tail wagging. Blonde level 3. Happy bark, tail wagging and rolling around. Bond level 4. Happy bark, tail wagging, rolling around and demanding of pats. Bond level 5. Happy bark, tail wagging, rolling around, demanding of pats and licks face and hands. Birthday. Happy howl during an event. Barking. First ascension. Happy bark. Second ascension. Happy barking. Third ascension. Happy panting and tail wagging. Fourth ascension. Howling. Welcome to Fanfic Audiobook, your go-to place for immersive audiobooks. If you enjoy the content, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to our channel for more amazing stories. Chapter 22. Taking a break. You got this, Mash. Ritska shouted out an encouragement to the pink-haired girl. See you. Arash and Ash stood off at the side and watched her spar with Vrindari. The girl was visibly sweating as the knight continued the practiced assault against her. I'm betting. CU looked thoughtful as he spoke. I'm betting he knocks her on her ass after 2 minutes. Such little faith? Arash raised an eyebrow. For shame, He tutted and shook his head. Cu sent him a questioning gaze before turning back to the spar. Okay, wise guy. How long do you think she'll last? A minute. Arash shrugged. Maybe less. She's not bad for a first-time sword fighter. I'm thinking he calls it before she gets knocked down. Ash spoke up with sigh. He shook his head at the display. She's only been wielding the practice sword for an hour and she's already straining herself. Well, Cu spoke up, the big guy has been whacking her for the past hour. Then there was the 2 hours of drills before that where she swung at the dummy. In Lothric, you were always expected to be ready to fight at a moment's notice. Ash replied, being tired would only mean your death. Oh yeah? How often did you die? I lost count after the first 100 times. Arash blinked and looked between the two in confusion. Seeing this, Cu decided to fill him in. He's a zombie. Couldn't properly die in his old world. He then looked back at Ash. Don't you guys just go insane or something? Hollowing. Ash clarified, then looked back at the pair sparring. It looks like they're about to finish. Cu blinked and looked back. Ah, right. How long was that? About a minute. Arash replied with a small smile. Guess I won. What do I win? Ash and Cu looked at each other and then back at the archer. The pair shrugged their shoulders, which caused the man to let out a small chuckle. Should have figured. You are certainly not the worst squire I've ever seen. Verndari spoke down at Mash as the girl panted. Not bad. You'll be able to hold your own against a hollow, but against one with real skill with the blade less so. He turned to Ritska. I would advise we continue our training regime, my liege. I don't know, Ritska muttered. What do you think, Mash? You are the one doing it. Well, Mash bit her lip before giving Ritska a shaky smile. I want to be able to protect Senpei to the best of my ability. Well put. Verndari, you see my liege? A determined squire. She will make a stout protector yet. I just wonder when she'll get her sword. Ritska mumbled under his breath, not quiet enough for Verndari to be unable to hear him as the knight scoffed. She must first learn to wield a blade before she is armed with one. He sighed, forgive me, my liege, but these are steps that must not be rushed. It would be best for all involved that she learn how to at the very least hold her own against me for a few minutes. Right. Ritska nodded. Also I said you could call me Fujimaru. And I shall continue to refer to you as my liege. Verndari replied in a stern tone, to do so otherwise would be disrespectful. Ritska released a sigh while Mash sent him a reassuring smile. Guess you were both right. Cu blinked as he looked between Ash and Arash. Guess you both win nothing. Suppose so. Ash shrugged. Any idea where everyone else is? I'm aware that Sasaki is with Andre overseeing the forging of his new sword. However, the location of the others eludes me. I think that the Olga lady took Beatrice. Cu shrugged. Think the woman wants an understanding of your sorcery, and since the little lady is all we've got so far. I see. Ash nodded his head. The others? The little knight has been riding that damned dog ever second she can. Cu scoffed and shook his head. You'd think she were a rider. I think she's been thinking about getting a saddle. I doubt Sif would allow such a thing. Ash shook his head, then blinked. I think. Arash shrugged. Don't know myself. Maybe he would. Well, she is a jouster, I believe. Cu spoke up. Big dog. Big sword. Could be a hell of a combo with the pair of them. Plus the wolf seems to like her. I believe he enjoys the attention he receives from her, rather than her being. Ash spoke up, which caused the other two to turn to him with equally thoughtful expressions. I can't really speak dog. Cu spoke with a frown, then pointed at Arash. Get that smirk off your face, you ass. The archer chuckled and looked away. I swear. Some of you people. I don't follow. Ash spoke up. Cu huffed and looked away with a frown while Arash shook his head and gave the saber a small smile. I'll tell you about it later. HMPH. Ash grunted and shook his head. I will take my leave. The physician promised to inform me where I could locate history books. Come on, boy. Astolfo let out a cackle as he raced down the halls of Chaldea while holding a large lump of raw meat. Come on. Go on, Sif. Gareth called out as she rode atop the panting wolf as it chased after the pink-haired rider. Get the meat. Woof. Sif kicked up in a burst of speed and closed the distance between himself and Astolfo in a split second. Astolfo let out a squeal of surprise before the wolf pounced him and sent him to the ground. Sif let out another bark before he lapped up the meat that Astolfo was holding. The blonde lancer let out a giggle as she rubbed the back of the wolf's head. Good boy. Gareth laughed as she continued to pat the animal. Good boy. Woof, best. Saber. Ever. Astolfo laughed as he got back to his feet and let out a small laugh as the wolf knocked him back to the ground and began sniffing him over for more meat. When it couldn't find any, it let out a pitiful whine and gave what Astolfo could only describe as puppy wolf eyes. Oh, Astolfo wriggled. Well, we need to ration the meat boy. More whining followed, which caused both Astolfo and Gareth to cringe. Astolfo, Gareth. The pair turned and looked down the corridor to see the confused-looking Sigurd walking towards them. What are you doing with Sif? Well, Astolfo rubbed his arm and nervously bounced on his heels. Sif wanted a walk. And the blood stains on the floor? We decided to feed him, Gareth called out with a wide smile, which caused the saber servant to scrunch his face up in confusion. Did you feed him the staff? Huh? Astolfo blinked, then made an "oh" expression and shook his head. No, we got some meat from the freezers for him. So, you fed him on the workers' rations? Yep. The workers, with limited rations, and currently no way to replace them. Absolutely. What? Why are you making that face? Oh, no, I see the problem. Astolfo and Gareth cringed while Sif's eyes darted guiltily to the side and his ears dropped. While I am pleased you are doing your best to welcome our new friend, Sigurd chuckled and gestured to Sif. Please try and keep things in perspective. It would not do for us to deprive our human friends of their only means of food. The then blinked and decided to add something as an afterthought. I would also not wish to anger Lady Olga more than necessary. Sorry, the trio gave apologies and hung their heads. Sigurd chuckled and turned around. You may still play, if you wish to work with Sif as a mount. The wolf perked up and titled its head to the side in a puzzled manner while Gareth burst into a wide grin. Then it would be best you worked together better. Right, Gareth grinned. Come on boy, we're going exploring. Woof. Sif released a bark before sprinting down the hallway. Sigurd's eyes went wide and he jumped to the side to avoid being flattened by the running animal. By the lords, he breathed out as he got back to his feet. The grinning Astolfo skipped up next to him. And he was the great wolf of Artorias? He let out a jovial laugh. Acts like a common pup. Well, he's just a big softy. Astolfo grinned then put on a thoughtful expression. I wonder how well he would get on with Hippo-kun. Sigurd turned around and placed a hand on Astolfo's shoulder. Perhaps. For the moment we should restrict ourselves to one beast on the base. Meh, Astolfo pouted. Fine, well, I can't really tell you all that much about sorcery. Beatrice let out a nervous chuckle as she rubbed her arms. I wasn't really a member of the school on Vinheim. Fine. Olga sighed and shook her head. What do you know then? Well, sorcery was invented by Sith. Beatrice replied then raised a single finger. He was a dragon by the way. Right. Olga nodded her head while frowning. And the staff? Ah. Right. It's a catalyst. Beatrice replied. Sorcery. It require a means of focusing the magic. So we have a catalyst. Are there restrictions to who can learn sorcery? It is mainly intelligence. Beatrice shrugged, then wilted under Olga's incredulous look. If you're smart enough to focus your willpower. Then you can learn sorcery. You aren't going to be a very good source of information, are you? Olga sighed and brought her head into her hands. Beatrice winced and hung her head. And no. Sorry, right. Andre crossed his arms. Ya want our sword to be about 3 feet, right? Yes. Sasaki nodded his head, or 90 centimeters if you wish to be specific. And ya want him. Thin blades, right? When Sasaki nodded, Andre grunted. I can do that. Ya want a scabbard? If I could impose. Andre waved him off. I can make swords like that in my sleep. Although. Never tried working with this steel. Not as strong at Titanite. He shrugged. I'll avenue it for ya by the end of the day. Gotta make the lil girl's straight sword first. My thanks. Sasaki nodded. Andre chuckled. Thousands of years work in a forge. I think you're the first one to thank me. Andre grumbled. Most just chuck their broken up blades at me and ask 'em to get fixed. It is a complicated craft, as I understand it. Sasaki shrugged. It seems to be common sense to be respectful to the one who makes your weapon. Hey, Andre released a small chuckle as he sat down in front of his anvil and materialized his hammer. Y'd think so, wouldn't ya? We've got a library on the 4th level. Roman replied then cringed. Unfortunately most of the books are related to fiction. Those that aren't are published papers on magi research which isn't linked to individual craft. Ash sighed. Then you have limited material on the history of your world?
No, we've still got all that. Roman gave him a small smile. It's just not going to be as specific. Mostly a general overview, although we have quite a few books on mythology. Roman then blinked, although, they might count as history now.
That will suffice. Ash nodded his head, then turned to leave before taking a quick glance at the screen Roman was working on. You are searching for the next singularity? Well, sort of. Roman scratched the back of his head. Right now that's a background operation I'm running. Truth of the matter is, we're low on supplies. Roman sighed. We weren't actually at peak operation capacity when Singularity F was detected. Most of the staff had gone home and we were forced to rush into everything. We lost most of the generators and the only reason we have lights right now is because of the engineering team, or what's left of them, working round the clock. Unfortunately, Roman sighed. That means that we lost about 60% of our food stores. How long can you last? Ash asked in concern. Well, there's only about 20 of us. He bit his lip. If we rationed it out, we'd last maybe 5 months? And there's no telling how long the singularities would last. Ash finished, then pointed at the screen, and the investigation into these aberrations in time? Those happen all the time. Roman waved him off. Normally they get stamped out by the world, although there's a brief window of about a week when they're active. He crossed his arms. Right now it's a bit of a side project, but I'm hoping we could reshift into these and gather supplies. Steal? No. Roman recoiled. I'd rather not be a bunch of bandits. We've got a few materials we could trade. One of the deceased magi on site was a metallurgist. A specific use for gold bars. He sighed. It feels wrong to use them. But we have little choice. And we would transport them back how? Well, Mash's shield acts as the summoning circle. All we need to do is set it up to transfer the supplies back. Ash nodded. I will leave you to Yo, Magi Mari says. You do your best. Ash and Roman stared at each other as a high-pitched girlish voice sounded out from the man's terminal. What was that? Ash looked over Roman's shoulder and down at the terminal. Nothing important. Roman jumped in front of it. It's just someone I ask advice from every now and again. It's no big deal. Right. Ash backed away from the man. I shall be in the library. See you. Roman waved him away, then went back to working on his computer. Damn it, Mari. I told you not to embarrass me like that. What if it had been the director? She would have tried to take you away from me. Ah, Betty, there you are. The witch jumped slightly and turned around to see Arash and see you walking towards her. We were wondering where you were. Lady Olga wanted to talk to me about sorcery. Beatrice slumped. I can't tell her that much though. I learned on my own, so it's unique to me. Ah, no worries. See, you waved her off. It's mostly just feeling for servants. He sniffed. Just as long as she doesn't start hounding me for primordial runes. He sighed, still pissed that learning those somehow makes me a caster. It's not that bad. Arash clapped him on the shoulder. You're still a warrior at heart. You just use a staff. Staff instead of a spear. Arash then cringed. Although considering you are more famous for wielding a spear, I suppose it could be quite upsetting. Yeah, no kidding. He huffed and turned back to Beatrice. So, little lady. Beatrice gulped slightly at the way his eyes seemed to glint and his smile became more predatory. Tell us about yourself. Arash let out a sigh. There's another thing your legend talked about. What? You turned to Arash with a blank face. She's pretty decent looking. He shrugged. She can say no if she wants. Arash rolled his eyes and gave the furiously stuttering caster a reassuring smile. Just ignore him, although I will admit to being a little curious myself. Haven't really met people from other worlds before. He chuckled, and if we're going to be working together, it would at least do to get to know each other. Well. I'm not really all that interesting. Beatrice looked down. You snorted and Arash chuckled. You were apparently interesting enough to be registered on your own throne of heroes. You smirked at her. That's gotta count for something. Well. I guess my journey to Ulasil. Oh? Arash smiled. Tell us about that then, come on. He gestured a thumb behind them. We'll talk about it back in the cafeteria. I think that Onion Knight made some Estus soup or whatever you guys can drink. It's actually some pretty alright stuff. You spoke up. Makes you feel all warm and tingly inside. Like alcohol without the actual taste. Arash blinked. That doesn't sound too bad. I might actually try some of that. I mean, you can, CU shrugged, it's alright, not the best not the worst, but I don't think that we were the intended recipients for it. Well, we technically are now. I guess we are. CU made a small noise of realization before turning around to the caster. Come along that, little lady. You can tell us all about Oilasil. Ulasil. Yeah. Your problem is that you grip your sword too tightly. Verndari pointed out as Mash repeated the stance. It restricts your movements, you aren't allowing yourself enough flexibility. Right, when Mash shifted her grip, Verndari sighed and with very little effort slapped the sword out of her hands. Now you grip it too lightly. Mash winced as Verndari crossed his arms. I noticed it during our spar. You have some knowledge of a blade. But it is unconscious. As if you have done this all before, but are now doing it all again and forgetting your previous skill. It might be the heroic spirit possessing me. Mash replied. I think they might have wielded a sword before. But I can't really tell all that much. I understand what you are saying, but it's like trying to learn something that I know and don't know at the same time. That makes very little sense to me. Verndari grumbled, then seemed to realize something. However, it has given me an idea. Oh, yes. You learned reasonably well during our spar. You showed signs of improvement as we continued. Thus I feel that a hands-on approach would be of a greater benefit to you in terms of learning how to hold a sword. What? Therefore, we shall continue our spars. Verndari announced. Once you have a workable understanding with your sword, we can move into different styles. Although given the size of your shield. A spear would work well. But the only other lancers we have are the blue-haired one and the Lady Knight. He shook his head. For the moment we shall focus on your sword. Okay, good. We shall begin shortly. Aren't I going to get a rest? No, one must always be prepared for a possible fight. You can never be sure when an attack might come. Alps Poye 60 AD, incoming, take cover. Get down. The cries rang out, which were swiftly followed by the clattering of armor as soldiers threw themselves down to avoid the hail of projectiles. There was a muffled cry of anguish as a viscous rope latched itself onto the face of a man who had been too slow to drop. The feeble attempts from his comrades did little to prevent him being pulled over the side of the wall. There was a horrific sound of muffled screaming followed by a tearing sound and the snapping of bones. The men closest closed their eyes and shook in horror at the sounds. Centurion Felix. Report. A voice cried out as the soldiers scrambled around. A man in steel armor with a helmet with a headdress sprinted down the stairs of the wall and towards the man calling out for him. Consul Vespasian. We did not anticipate your arrival from Rome. Centurion Felix spoke as soon as he came up to the aging man. The man snorted and thrust a parchment into the centurion's hands. It's Legate Vespasian now. The emperor has ordered that all those with former ranks return to active service, effective immediately. The centurion widened his eyes as he read through the parchment, then snapped to attention. What is the situation? The prefect led a small scouting party yesterday, sir. The centurion began. We had received word from Gaul of an individual. The creatures seemed to be hunting, for lack of a better word, sir. The prefect stated he would lead the scouting party himself and took 50 legionnaires with him and Centurion Magnus. Then where is he? Vespasian asked with a scowl. Felix winced. He sent word back to us via his magic crystals several hours ago, sir. He reported encountering the individual in question and that he was returning. Felix looked over his shoulder at the sound of someone screaming. Eyes front centurion. Yes, sir, he snapped back around. What else can you inform me of the situation? The watchtower a mile from here missed their check in time, sir. Then they came out of the trees. Just started throwing themselves at us. Felix took in a deep breath. They've been at this for nearly 2 hours, sir. We can keep them at bay, but it's only the little ones right now. HMPH. Vespasian grunted. Return to your duty. Yes, sir. Felix saluted and sprinted back to the wall. Archers, to the wall. Vespasian turned around. Tribune Rufus. He called out. A man stepped towards him. Your orders, sir? Have the 6th Legion take up defensive positions alongside the garrison here. Ensure that if we are forced to retreat, the roads remain protected. Yes, sir. I'll deploy the men. They nodded and walked off and began barking out orders to the centurions. Walker. A man from the gate shouted. Walker to the north, it's running to the gate. The men visibly paled at the shout before Vespasian shouted out. Reinforce the gate. Show your courage, legionnaires. get archers and slingers on the wall, take it down. There was a horrifying roar before the gates to the fort rumbled and something smashed into them. The cry sounded again and was followed by the wooden gate receiving another battering. Reinforce the gate, Felix shouted out, get the beams up. Nearly a dozen men sprinted towards the gate holding various sized pieces of wood and used them to block the gate as best they could. The screaming and battering at the gate continued. They're climbing the walls, archers, release volley. How long can we hold, sir? Rufus asked as he walked up behind Vespasian. The older man scowled. As long as we can. In another chapter, also some of you might have noticed a certain figure. Vespasian, I actually looked him up, I knew of him beforehand, and saw that he was alive during Nero's rule as a consul having retired. Well, with the whole spider monsters, I figured it would make sense for Nero to make it an all-hands-on-deck kind of situation. So, we won't go into the singularity until the chapter after the next one. Chapter 23. Better get to it. This was probably one of my worst ideas. CU muttered with a frown as he palmed his face. He turned to Ash with a slight scowl. The next time I suggest doing this, I want you to punch me in the face. It wasn't a terrible idea. Ash shrugged. It was expected that Arash would be skilled in such a sport. It's darts. CU threw up his hands. I only heard about the game a couple hours ago from the barkeep. I don't think the archer over there had ever even heard of it before. How was I supposed to know he'd be this good at it? Don't be so sour, Lancer. Arash smirked as he scored a 180 in a flurry of movement. I'm actually having quite the enjoyable time. He quickly retrieved the darts from the board and passed them over to the Lancer servant. Bet you are, CU grumbled, then caught the amused expression Ash was giving him. Oh, think it's funny to ya? CU scowled and thrust the darts into Ash's hands. You see if you can do better then. Ash blinked and looked to Arash, who shrugged his shoulders. Very well then. Ash stood up and walked to the same spot where Arash stood. Narrowing his eyes at the board, he held the darts in a similar manner as he held throwing knives. They weren't as heavy, but he imagined the principle remained the same. In a flurry of movement, Ash's hands blurred as he threw the darts at the board with a surprising degree of accuracy. Not quite as skilled as Arash, but certainly more skilled than either of them was expecting. Ash turned back to see Arash with a slightly raised eyebrow and an amused expression on his face while CU glared at him before shaking his head. I call bullshit. You used your mystical ghoul skills. Mystical ghoul skills? Ash blinked. No, I simply learned that it's much safer to stand at a distance and throw sharp things at a rampaging monster than charge it like an idiot. How many times did you have to die to work that out? More than was probably necessary. What a fucking loser. A slurred voice shouted across the bar. The group turned to see Beatrice, red-faced, grinning like a fool and holding a tankard while Sigward stood to her side. The Onion Knight tried to retrieve the tankard only for Beatrice to hiss at him like a cat and clutch the mug to her chest like a precious gem. Keep away from my booze, you fucking fruit. I thought onions were vegetables? Astolfo leaned in a whisper to Gareth. The blonde-haired knight gave a thoughtful nod, although the pair weren't as quite as they hoped as Beatrice rounded on them. I heard that. You? She narrowed her eyes at the pink-haired boy. W. Why are you prettier than me? She pouted and slammed her head on the table before crying. Well, CU blinked. Perhaps we shouldn't let her near the special brew. She had barely half a mug. Sigward sighed. If I knew her alcohol tolerance was this bad, I would have restrained her better. Just don't let Mirror on the wall see her like this. Astolfo quipped. He'll probably have her running circuits around the base. You'll be joining her if you aren't careful. A voice rung out. Astolfo let out a shriek as Verndari materialized right behind the boy, steel helm looming over him. I decided to read up on my comrades. Astolfo shrank further into his seat. I don't know whether to thank this Charlemagne for preventing you from becoming a king, or pitying him for being saddled with your stupidity. Hey, Astolfo frowned. I make a great saddle, people love riding me. A pregnant pause followed the boy's declaration as everyone in the room stared at him. Arash leaned down towards Ash and CU and whispered to them. Is he always like that? Yeah, indeed. Verndari stood back up to his full height, refusing to deign to boy with a reply before he turned to Gareth. Where is the beast? Sif? Gareth questioned. When Verndari nodded, she elaborated. I think he went for a nap near Smith Andre's forge. I thought the smith despised the beast? He does? I thought you were tutoring Lady Mash? Sigward asked with a slightly confused expression. Verndari turned his head to the knight and replied. I have her performing basic thrusts and slashes with a practice sword. I told her to continue until I returned. I see, Sigward nodded, and her progress in swordplay? Not great, not terrible. Verndari replied. She will not match any of us in a duel, but she isn't completely worthless in combat should the need arise. That ain't too bad. Siyu nodded his head. If nothing else, the little lady can protect the kid from getting skewered. HMPH. Verndari grunted. Regardless, I am not here to deliver a report on the squire's progress. I received word that our liege's lord will have need of us. Apparently she is currently searching for us. Sorceress Olga. Ash raised an eyebrow. When are we to expect her? As he said that, the door to the bar opened up. There you are. Olga spoke out as she walked in, then scrunched her face up when she took in the sight of Beatrice hunched over a table crying while Sigward attempted to comfort her. What happened to her? Special brew. Siyu spoke up. You need us for something? Romani has narrowed down the next site for a singularity. He believes he'll have it within the next day. Prepare yourselves for potential deployment. I'll have Master Candidate 4. My liege's name is Fujimaru Ritsuka. Verndari spoke with a stern tone. Subordinate to yourself or not, I would ask that you refrain from disrespecting him by not using his name. Kid's done all right so far. Siyu shrugged. I'd say he's at least earned you calling him by his name. I concur. Ash spoke up, looking towards Olga with a stern expression. Your number is few already. It would be best to treat your comrades with respect if we are to survive the coming battles. Wah! Olga visibly recoiled, her cheeks having a slightly red tint to them before she coughed into her hand and composed herself as best she could. I admit that Master Candidate 4. Candidate Fujimaru has performed well thus far. I suppose a change in title would be appropriate. Siyu stared at her before he let out a small laugh. You're terrible at showing your true feelings, aren't you? Wah, how dare. She reminds me of those stuck-up sorceress. Beatrice slurred as she rose her head and let out a little giggle. Mother always said those guys were pricks. Hee. Pricks. That's another word for D. She prop MTLY fell back onto the table and started to snore very loudly. How can she even get drunk? Olga asked, shocked and slightly curious. Sigward flashed her a guilty look as he slowly uncurled Beatrice's fingers from the mug. Siegbrow. He replied, one of the few drinks that affect undead. However, I appear to have overestimated her tolerance for it. Olga's face scrunched up in annoyance. When she wakes up, tell her to avoid drinking so close to a potential singularity. She could be necessary and I will not have her putting the team at risk because she's a habitual drunk. I will do what I see. He was cut off when the intercom in Chaldea called out with Roman's voice coming out of it. Will Director Olga, Fujimaru, Mash, Ash and Da Vinci please report to the control room? Thank you. Ash looked over to Olga and shrugged his shoulders before standing up and cracking his neck. It seems we have a summons to answer. Sorceress Olga. Ash replied as his helm materialized in his hands and he slid it over his head. We had best not tally. I do not tally. Olga fumed as Ash passed her. The woman had a slightly annoyed expression on her face. Romani said it wouldn't be for another few hours before they narrowed down the singularity. In that case, perhaps something has occurred. I would rather believe that Romani was just incompetent. Olga huffed, although her eyes portrayed a sense of worry. Otherwise, the only other reason that a singularity would be detected quicker would be if something has caused a catastrophic level of damage to human history. Luck has never been with the undead. Ash grimly replied, and the physician, despite his personality, has yet to show stupidity in regards to his job. I know. Olga replied with a frown. That's why I'm worried. Ash and Olga entered the control room to find the others already assembled. Romani flashed the pair a small smile, although his eyes contained a great degree of anxiety. Explain yourself, Romani. Olga narrowed her eyes. You told me it would take hours, perhaps another day, to detect another singularity. Whoa. Romani held up his hands as Olga jabbed a finger in his face. I wasn't lying when I said that. I'd already narrowed it down to the continent. All we really needed was the country and time period. Then what went wrong? She retracted her finger from him. However, Da Vinci spoke up first before Romani could reply. The singularity decided to reveal itself first. She said, pointing to the terminal showing a map of Europe. This is a map of the Roman Empire. Circa 60 AD. Olga took her eyes away from Romani and looked at the screen, and then towards the preliminary readings already recovered from their detection of the singularity and promptly blanched. That's. Someone was conducting a magical experiment there. Romani replied with a grave tone, as he explained to everyone else who didn't understand. These are just the basic readings, but the readings we've already recorded could only be achieved if someone had access to the major ley lines and was draining them of power. Wait. Ritsuka held up his hands. Draining the ley lines? You can do that? Of course you can't, Olga snapped. High-class magi and caster servants can draw power from them, but to drain them in their entirety like this, we would be breaching into the realms of a phantasmal or a divine spirit. Ash looked to the screen. Given your concern, I shall assume this time period was not home to gods?
No, Romani shook his head. They still existed, but they couldn't do anything like this.
This is bad, isn't it? Ritsuka asked. Everyone else nodded their heads. Da Vinci spoke up. Not quite as bad as you might think, she replied. Whatever is draining the ley lines, it's likely using it as fuel for the ritual rather than for itself. That much magical energy would oversaturate most creatures and kill them. Right. Olga nodded her head, likely using the Holy Grail as some kind of siphon, draining the ley lines for their magical energy to act as fuel. I thought that Grail was a wish-granting device. Ritsuka asked slightly nervously. Wouldn't enough magical energy allow it to grant wishes? It would, if that is what the user was actually funneling magical energy into it for. Da Vinci replied with a wide smile. However, the existence of the singularity means they are using the Grail to act as the battery for a ritual or experiment which is causing the degradation of human history in this time period. Oh, Ritsuka let out a small sigh of relief. So, it's not that bad?
Oh no, it's still pretty bad. Da Vinci replied immediately with a straight face. Whatever requires that much magical energy can't be good for anyone's health. Especially if it's harming human history.
Can you tell us where the exact coordinates are? Ash asked. Romani cringed and sent him a shaky expression. Not really. He shook his head. Whatever they are doing, it's messing with our readings. We know they are draining the ley lines, but we can't tell where. Going in blind then? Ash nodded his head, no different from last time. Sorry. Romani gave a sympathetic expression. We can try and drop you off inside Roman territory. You'll probably figure out pretty quickly what's going on at that point. Which servants are you bringing along, Mr. Protagonist? Da Vinci gave Ritsuka a wide smile as her eyes gleamed. I recommend the new ones. The hero needs to see what his new sidekicks can do. Side-kicks? Ash tilted his head in confusion and looked at Romani. Why is a strike to the body relevant? Romani pinched the bridge of his nose. Ritsuka let out a small sigh and rolled his eyes. I probably should. I'll get the new servants to meet me in the Rayshift chamber. Ah, Ash let out a small noise and raised a hand. Sorceress Beatrice. Maybe an issue. Why? She is currently incapacitated. They stared at him for a few moments. She's drunk. What? Ritsuka let out a small shout of alarm. How? When? Sigward's special brew. Ash clarified. It's quite strong. You should try it. Does actually have a pleasant aftertaste when the burning leaves you. Burning? Ritsuka whispered to himself, then looked back to Ash and shook his head. Sorry, I'm too young to drink. Really? Ash tilted his head and looked at Romani. You would send the boy out to battle, but not to a tavern? I don't make the rules. Romani shrugged. Also, I don't think sending him out to a battlefield after drinking is the best idea. True. Ash nodded his head. What about after the battle? I am not having my subordinate getting inebriated in a bar. Olga dryly put. We are supposed to act like professionals, and this will all end up in a report after we have fixed this crisis and brought She cut herself off and her expression faltered somewhat. Professor Laner to justice. Romani looked at her sorrowfully for a few moments before turning back to Ritsuka. I'll prepare the Rayshift chamber for you. I believe Da Vinci covered your mystic code? Kinda, Ritsuka shrugged. I understand it can let me boost my servants temporarily. You didn't even know what your mystic code uniform could do? Olga turned to Ritsuka with a dead expression. The black-haired boy winced and backed away from her slightly. Well, no one ever explained it to me. Olga stared at him for a few moments before she closed her eyes and took in a deep breath. After she slowly exhaled, she opened them again. Please summon your servants and take yourself and Kirillite down to the Rayshift chamber and await departure. All right. Ritsuka nodded and proceeded to sprint out of the room. Mash bowed her head and followed after him. Ash watched them leave with a raised eyebrow behind his helm before he looked down at Olga. I'm surprised. I had thought you would have made your anger more apparent. Don't. She pinched the bridge of her nose and shook her head. At this point, I will have to take responsibility and properly teach him in the basics of magecraft. She scowled. This is why I dislike relying on civilians to fill in the gaps. Ash grunted and shook his head before looking over at Romani. A thought occurs. Why was I summoned to this meeting? Huh? Romani blinked and looked at him in surprise. What do you mean? I understand that Scholar Da Vinci has some insight into this situation. You are the physician and one of the few remaining living humans with a high position. Sorceress Olga is apparently your leader. Master Fujimaru is your subordinate and the one going in Squire Kirillite is linked to him. He explained before tilting his head, thus I am curious as to why I am here. Romani stared at him, then looked at Da Vinci before turning back to the knight and scratching the back of his head. Besides Mash, you're basically Fujimaru's first full servant. It seemed kind of weird to not invite you.
I see. Ash nodded his head. I will join Master down below. The undead servant bid a quick farewell and departed the room, swiftly following to join Mash and Ritska on their way to the Rayshift chamber.
60 AD, unknown location. I am surprised to see you back so soon. Lev replied with a slightly raised eyebrow. I had assumed that the beast needed a greater degree of control. It does. The figure in black armor replied, a monotone voice. However, I have recently found one to act in my stead. Lev shrugged, uncaring of the details. More importantly, I see that the summoning was a success. It was. Lev replied, a bemused look on his face, a rather disgusting creature, yet so human too. Even my king was surprised. That is the power of the deep. The figure replied with a slight chuckle. Aldrich was the more successful of those who looked into the abyss. The figure shook their head, however they thought too small. Lev raised a single eyebrow but said nothing, prompting the figure to continue. He saw the deep only as a means of survival. To live beyond the fading of the flame. My goals are far more. He raised his right hand. Black energy danced across his arm and condensed in his palm before he crushed it. Intricate. Lev grunted. Remember that the king keeps you and your pet alive because it is a nuance to him. He narrowed his eyes. Nothing more. Stray from the path he has ordained for you. And I will meet a swift and terrible end. The figure scoffed. I am aware of your zealotry. Regardless, the Chaldeans will arrive soon. I am aware. Lev drawled, quite the persistent little rodents that they are. His lip curled in disgust. The king is displeased that they were able to claim the Holy Grail in France. Luck. The figure replied with a raised hand, nothing more than luck. I know it was luck. Lev hissed. You think that band of pathetic failures led by a child who was starved for attention could actually accomplish anything? The victory of the Chaldean master was luck. The figure reiterated. The victory of the Ashen One, however, was not. He crossed his arms. The child is young and stupid. The Ashen One is not. Do not underestimate his means and skill. Especially if more have begun to cross over. Yes. Lev narrowed his eyes. The glutton and the spider-obsessed freak have already confirmed the rather bizarre difference between the two worlds. The figure nodded and then tilted his head at Lev. You intend to remain here then? Orders. Lev replied. I have to ensure that the Chaldeans do not succeed here. He rolled his eyes, however unlikely that may be. Or how personally revolting. Aldrich is offensive to you? He is a disturbing curiosity. Lev reiterated. That does not make him any less disgusting. Yes, he is rather freakish. The figure nodded his head. After a few moments it twitched slightly. I am to return again. He hissed. That troublesome caster. Problems, none that are of immediate concern. The figure assured. They will be dealt with swiftly. A black rift opened behind the figure and he turned around to move through it. After passing through, the rift snapped shut, leaving Lev behind in an empty room.
Same time, elsewhere. Run. The knight in armor shouted. The Roman legionnaires immediately broke into a sprint through the woods. Don't stop. Aulus, watch the flanks.
Yes, prefect. The centurion nodded his head as his eyes darted around the sides of the running column of men. A screech echoed through the forest, followed by the crashing of trees gradually getting louder. Aulus felt the hairs on the back of his neck stand up as a cold sweat traveled down his spine at the noises. Don't let your fear distract you. The knight shouted out from the back of the column. Keep running, by the sun, they shall not have you while I still draw breath. They only serve to slow us down. A female voice hissed at the knight. The man paid her no attention as he continued to cast a fleeting glance over his shoulder every few seconds as they continued to run through the woods. We can easily outpace them. They can serve as a distraction while we will continue to guard them. The knight snapped his head to the woman and narrowed his eyes. I was charged with protecting their lives. I will not leave them for the beast to consume. The beasts will consume us if we dawdle, she hissed. You promised my asylum in return for my aid. I can't help you if I'm dead. I was under the impression that my lady was a chaos witch. The knight replied easily. I doubt you would be felled so easily. That is beside the point. The woman hissed at him. Strategically, my life matters more than theirs. Their lives matter to me just as much as yours. The knight hotly responded, before the crashing of trees caused him to cast another glance over his shoulder. The sound of snapping wood got closer and the knight let out a small curse under his breath before turning back to the woman. I will not besmirch the name of the warriors of sunlight and abandon my charges to their death. The woman released a growl of annoyance before her body swung around. The knight stared in confusion as her top half reared up and the inhuman lower part of her body glowed a brilliant orange. The sharpened mouth opened to reveal rows of knife-like teeth and the back of the creature's throat glowed before shooting forth a wave of fire into the woods, setting alight most of the trees in its path and creating a veritable wall of fire. That won't delay them long, the woman muttered as she looked back down at the knight. Now can we hurry along? My lady. The knight chuckled and broke into a sprint alongside her, her 8 legs crashing through the bushes and trees alongside him. I believe I may have misjudged you. TCH. She clicked her tongue. You sunlight fanatics. In the prologue for Rome, next chapter is when they land and, likely, make first encounters. How exciting. But yeah, chapters in Chaldea will likely be a little shorter for the time being, until we get a few more servants that is. Anyway, am I going to do interludes and events? Currently. No idea. Probably. Maybe.